Hey guys, it's Stack Lessons here. Welcome to another practice exam. Today we've got 20 questions for you, covering security controls and compliance, Route 53 routing policies, and EC2 cost optimization. A 10-second countdown after each one so you can pick your answer. Then the reveal. Pause whenever you need to. Good luck and enjoy. Okay. Question 1. Likely distractors ahead. A solutions architect is designing an order processing pipeline for a retail platform. When a customer places an order, the event must be delivered to 3 independent downstream services simultaneously: an inventory management service, an email confirmation service, and a fraud detection service. Each service must independently process every order event. The architect selects Amazon SNS to implement this fan-out pattern. Which 2 characteristics of Amazon SNS make it the appropriate service for this use case? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option B and Option D. SQS features are hiding inside the wrong answer set. Amazon SNS is a publish-subscribe messaging service that enables fan-out architectures. When a message is published to an SNS topic, all subscribed endpoints receive the same message simultaneously and independently, which is exactly what is needed when 3 separate downstream services must each process every order event without one service's behavior affecting another. SNS supports a broad range of subscriber endpoint types including SQS queues, Lambda functions, HTTP and HTTPS webhooks, email, and SMS. This flexibility allows each of the 3 downstream services to subscribe using whatever integration pattern fits its architecture. Delivering messages to a single consumer for ordered sequential processing describes Amazon SQS, which is a point-to-point queue designed for exactly that pattern. Message retention for up to 14 days when consumers are unavailable is a characteristic of Amazon SQS, not SNS. SNS does not persist messages if a subscriber is unreachable at delivery time. Dead letter queues are primarily a feature of Amazon SQS and AWS Lambda, while SNS subscriptions can optionally be configured with a DL queue for failed delivery attempts. This is not a defining characteristic that makes SNS appropriate for fan-out, and it does not retry indefinitely. Quick heads up, this one trips a lot of people up. Here is the deeper version. Amazon SNS is a publish-subscribe messaging service that enables fan-out architectures. When a message is published to an SNS topic, all subscribed endpoints receive the same message simultaneously and independently, which is exactly what is needed when 3 separate downstream services must each process every order event without one service's behavior affecting another. SNS supports a broad range of subscriber endpoint types including SQS queues, Lambda functions, HTTP and HTTPS webhooks, email, and SMS. This flexibility allows each of the 3 downstream services to subscribe using whatever integration pattern fits its architecture. Delivering messages to a single consumer for ordered sequential processing describes Amazon SQS, which is a point-to-point queue designed for exactly that pattern. Message retention for up to 14 days when consumers are unavailable is a characteristic of Amazon SQS, not SNS. SNS does not persist messages if a subscriber is unreachable at delivery time. Dead letter queues are primarily a feature of Amazon SQS and AWS Lambda, while SNS subscriptions can optionally be configured with a DL queue for failed delivery attempts. This is not a defining characteristic that makes SNS appropriate for fan-out, and it does not retry indefinitely. Okay. Question 2. Anchor on the exact workload. Fabricam Retail security team has detected 2 distinct threats: crafted HTTP requests containing SQL injection payloads attempting to manipulate the backend database, and a high-volume UDP packet flood overwhelming the application load balancer with spoofed traffic. Which 2 AWS services provide the most direct protection against each of these attack types respectively? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option D. Match the attack layer to the service designed for it. AWS WAF is a web application firewall that inspects and filters HTTP and HTTPS traffic at the application layer, Layer 7. It uses configurable rules and AWS managed rule groups to detect and block malicious web requests, including SQL injection and cross-site scripting before they reach the origin server, directly addressing the application layer attack. AWS Shield provides managed DDoS protection. Shield standard is automatically enabled for all AWS customers and defends against volumetric floods, protocol attacks, and reflection attacks targeting layers 3 and 4, directly addressing the UDP flood described. Shield Advanced adds a 24/7 DDoS response team and enhanced detection for organizations requiring elevated protection. Amazon Guard Duty is a continuous threat detection service that analyzes CloudTrail events, VPC flow logs, and DNS logs to surface malicious or anomalous behavior inside the AWS account. It identifies threats through log analysis after the fact, but does not inspect or block inbound HTTP or UDP traffic in real time. Amazon Inspector performs automated vulnerability assessments against EC2 instances and container images to identify software vulnerabilities. It assesses configuration risk rather than blocking live attack traffic. Amazon Macie uses machine learning to discover and protect sensitive data stored in Amazon S3 and addresses data exposure risk, not network or application layer attacks. Here we go. Question 3. Make the distractors prove themselves. ReliCloud stores customer contract documents in an Amazon S3 bucket in the US East 1 region. Their legal team requires that every new and updated document be automatically copied to a separate S3 bucket in EU Central 1 for data residency compliance. Each bucket must maintain its own independent access control policies. Which approach meets these requirements with the least operational overhead? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. No Lambda, no data sync, built-in S3 feature wins here. Amazon S3 cross-region replication is a built-in S3 capability that automatically replicates new and updated objects from a source bucket in one AWS region to a destination bucket in a different region. Each bucket retains its own independent IAM access control policies. Enabling cross-region replication requires only activating versioning on both buckets and configuring a replication rule, no custom code, no additional services, and no ongoing maintenance. Writing a Lambda function achieves the same result, but introduces custom code to develop, test, secure, and monitor, significantly increasing operational overhead without providing additional value. AWS Data Sync is designed for scheduled bulk data migrations, not continuous real-time replication of individual objects as they are uploaded. S3 lifecycle policies transition objects between storage classes or expire them based on age. They do not replicate objects to buckets in separate AWS regions. Next up, for question 4, the qualifier matters. ReliCloud's e-commerce platform is deployed in 3 AWS regions, US East 1, EU West 1, and App Southeast 1. Customer analytics show that checkout abandonment rates spike when users experience high network latency during the payment step. The operations team wants Amazon Route 53 to automatically direct each user's DNS query to the AWS region that will provide the lowest measured network latency for that specific user's connection. Which Route 53 routing policy should they implement? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. The word measured separates latency from geolocation routing. Latency-based routing evaluates measured network latency from the client's DNS resolver to each configured AWS region endpoint and returns the record for the region delivering the lowest latency. This directly minimizes checkout latency for each individual user, regardless of geographic boundaries. Geolocation routing directs traffic based on where the DNS query originates geographically. For example, queries from Europe go to EU West 1, but it does not measure actual network conditions. A user near a geographic boundary might be routed to a geographically close region that nonetheless has higher measured latency than a slightly more distant alternative. Weighted routing distributes traffic proportionally across endpoints using administrator-assigned weights. It does not evaluate network conditions for individual users, and would consistently send some percentage of traffic to higher latency regions without regard to connection quality. Failover routing is a resilience pattern that sends all traffic to a primary endpoint, and only switches to a secondary when health checks detect a failure. It is designed for disaster recovery, not for optimizing per-user network performance across multiple equally active endpoints. Next up, question 5. Solve the situation, not the key word. ADATM Insurance's production environment recently suffered a critical application server failure that required 5 hours of manual recovery by engineers following outdated runbooks. The architecture team decides to define all infrastructure using AWS CloudFormation templates, so the environment can be fully recreated from code after any failure, and to configure Amazon RDS Multi as so the database fails over automatically without engineer intervention. These two decisions collectively address which AWS well-architected framework pillar. Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Automatic recovery without human intervention is reliability. The reliability pillar of the AWS well-architected framework emphasizes designing systems that recover automatically from failures without requiring human intervention. Using AWS CloudFormation to define infrastructure as code directly addresses the manual runbook problem. Instead of an error-prone rebuild, the entire environment can be recreated with a single stack deployment, ensuring repeatability and eliminating dependence on outdated documentation. Configuring Amazon RDS Multi as ensures the database automatically fails over to a warm standby instance within minutes when the primary fails, removing the need for engineers to intervene during a database-level outage. Operational excellence focuses on running and monitoring systems to deliver business value and continuously improving processes and procedures, for example, automating runbook execution or establishing observability pipelines. While CloudFormation supports automation broadly, its use here specifically solves an infrastructure recovery problem, which belongs to the reliability pillar. Security addresses protecting systems and data through identity management, encryption, and threat detection. It does not cover automated failure recovery. Performance efficiency focuses on using computing resources optimally and scaling to match demand, not on ensuring systems recover correctly from failures. 5 in. Note how SNS and SQS features swap in distractors. WAF handles layer 7 while Shield covers layer 3 and 4, and built-in S3 features always beat custom Lambda for least overhead questions. Now, question 6. Picture the scenario first. Fabricam Financial Services operates a global investment platform serving users in North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. The platform delivers two distinct workload types: static marketing content such as images, JavaScript bundles, and CSS files that change infrequently, and a real-time trading API that requires the lowest possible network latency to back-end servers in US East 1. Which combination of AWS services best addresses both workload types? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option D. Static content caches. Dynamic API calls cannot be cached. Amazon CloudFront is a content delivery network that caches static assets at edge locations worldwide, dramatically reducing latency for infrequently changing files such as images, JavaScript bundles, and CSS. It is specifically optimized for HTTP-based content caching and delivery, eliminating repeated origin fetches for the same assets. AWS Global Accelerator uses the AWS Global Private Network backbone to route TCP and UDP traffic from the nearest AWS Edge location directly to the application endpoint, providing consistent low-latency connectivity for dynamic, non-cacheable workloads, like real-time trading APIs, where caching provides no benefit. Using Global Accelerator for static content forfeits the caching advantage that CloudFront provides, increasing both origin load and per-request latency. Using CloudFront for the trading API is suboptimal, because trading API responses are unique per request and cannot be cached, meaning CloudFront would simply pass requests through without any benefit. Route 53 latency-based routing improves DNS resolution time, but does not improve TCP transit across the Internet backbone the way Global Accelerator does. 2 workloads, 2 tools. Let's map each one to the right AWS service. Traders worldwide load Fabricom's homepage, images, CSS, and JavaScript bundles. That same site has a live trade button hitting a server in Virginia. These need completely different solutions. Static files don't change often. CloudFront caches them at hundreds of edge locations, so a Tokyo trader gets the file from Tokyo. Fast and cheap. But a live trade can't be cached. Every request is unique. It needs a fast network path. Global Accelerator routes trades over AWS's private backbone, straight to us East 1. Route 53 latency routing only fixes DNS lookup speed. It doesn't help the actual network connection. The trap is swapping CloudFront and Global Accelerator. Match the tool to the workload. Now, this is question 7. Litware Research is running large-scale genomic data processing jobs that analyze petabytes of sequencing data. Each job takes 4 to 6 hours to complete, and can be checkpointed and restarted from a saved state if interrupted. The jobs run sporadically, sometimes multiple times per day, sometimes not at all for several days. The team wants to minimize compute costs. Which EC2 purchasing option should they use? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Checkpoint and restart makes this a textbook Spot job. Spot instances provide the deepest discount on EC2 capacity, up to 90% compared to on-demand pricing, by using spare AWS compute capacity. They are the ideal choice for workloads that are flexible, tolerate interruptions, and can be restarted. Genomic processing jobs that can be checkpointed and resumed from a saved state are a classic Spot instance use case. When AWS needs to reclaim capacity, Spot instances receive a 2-minute interruption notice, giving the application time to checkpoint its progress. On-demand instances deliver reliable compute without interruption risk, but at the highest per-hour price, making them unnecessarily expensive for interruptible batch workloads with no strict deadlines. Reserved instances offer discounts of up to 72% compared to on-demand, for workloads that run consistently over 1 or 3 years, but they are not cost-efficient for sporadic batch jobs with irregular frequency because unused reservation time cannot be recovered. Dedicated hosts provide physical server isolation for licensing or compliance requirements, and are significantly more expensive. They address a fundamentally different need. Let us keep moving. Question 8. Check the condition before the service. Northwind Group manages 5 separate AWS accounts across its subsidiaries. The group's finance director wants a single consolidated monthly invoice covering all 5 accounts rather than 5 separate invoices. The director also wants reserved instance capacity purchased in the management account to automatically apply discounts to matching usage in member accounts whenever the management account is not consuming that reserved capacity itself. Which AWS feature provides both capabilities? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. One invoice plus cross-account resharing. Organizations does both. AWS Organizations with consolidated billing combines charges from all member accounts into a single invoice delivered to the management account, eliminating the need to track and pay separate invoices for each subsidiary. Consolidated billing also pools reserved instance and savings plans usage across the entire organization. When the account that purchased a reservation is not consuming all of its reserved capacity, the unused discount automatically applies to matching usage in other member accounts within the organization, maximizing the effective utilization and financial benefit of reserved capacity commitments. AWS Cost Explorer with cross-account aggregation provides visibility into spending patterns across multiple accounts and surfaces cost optimization recommendations, but it does not unify billing into a single invoice or enable the sharing of reserved instance discounts between accounts. AWS Config with an aggregated view collects resource configuration and compliance data across multiple accounts into a central view. It is a governance and configuration compliance tool and has no function related to billing consolidation or reserved instance sharing. AWS Budgets allows setting spending thresholds and automated alert or action responses per account or per organization, but it does not consolidate invoices or enable reserved instance discount pooling across accounts. Let us keep moving. Question 9. Map the qualifier to the answer. A defense contractor is required by regulation to store cryptographic key material exclusively on dedicated, single-tenant hardware that no other customer shares. The regulation also requires that the cloud provider have zero operational visibility into key material or cryptographic operations. The security team needs to manage HSM credentials entirely outside of AWS IAM. Which AWS service meets all of these requirements? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Single tenant and zero AWS visibility eliminate KMS immediately. AWS Cloud HSM provides single-tenant hardware security modules dedicated exclusively to each customer. The data plane is end-to-end encrypted and not visible to AWS, meaning AWS has zero operational visibility into key material or cryptographic operations performed within the HSM. Customers manage their own HSM user credentials entirely outside of IAM, so AWS cannot retrieve or observe cryptographic operations under any circumstances. This fully satisfies the dedicated hardware, zero provider visibility, and independent credential management requirements. AWS Key Management Service with customer-managed keys uses AWS Managed, multi-tenant HSM infrastructure. While AWS cannot retrieve plaintext key material from KMS, the underlying hardware is shared infrastructure managed and operated by AWS. This fails both the dedicated hardware requirement and the zero provider visibility requirement, as AWS retains operational management of the HSM fleet. AWS Secrets Manager is designed for storing and rotating application secrets such as database credentials and API keys. It is not a hardware security module, and does not provide dedicated cryptographic hardware or the isolation guarantees required by the regulation. AWS Certificate Manager Private Certificate Authority is a managed service for issuing private SSL/TLS certificates within a PKI hierarchy. It does not provide dedicated HSM hardware for general cryptographic key management, and does not offer the customer exclusive control demanded by the regulation. This question has 3 hard requirements. Let's see which one eliminates almost every service. Imagine you're a defense contractor storing encryption keys for classified work. Your regulator gave you 3 hard requirements. 1. Dedicated hardware no one else shares. 2. Zero AWS visibility into your keys. 3. Credentials outside IAM entirely. Key Management Service, or KMS, looks tempting. It's built for encryption, but KMS runs on multi-tenant hardware AWS still manages. That kills 2 requirements right away. Secrets Manager stores passwords and API keys, not specialized crypto hardware. Certificate Manager Private CA issues TLS certificates, a different problem. Cloud HSM gives you a module only you touch. Its data plane is encrypted. AWS cannot see inside. It has its own credential system, completely outside IAM. 3 qualifiers, 3 traps. Cloud HSM clears all 3. Time for another one. Question 10. Look for the answer that fully satisfies it. ReliCloud operates a customer-facing web portal with stable, predictable baseline compute needs that must run continuously for the next 3 years. During marketing campaigns roughly 6 times per year, traffic spikes to 3 times the baseline load for 48-hour periods. The operations team wants to minimize total EC2 compute costs while ensuring the portal remains fully available through every campaign spike. Which combination of EC2 purchasing options should they use? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option B. Spot looks cheap for the baseline, but interruption risk kills it. Reserved instances with a 3-year commitment provide up to 72% savings compared to on-demand pricing, and are ideal for the stable, continuous baseline load that can be forecasted accurately over a multi-year horizon. On-demand instances are the correct choice for campaign spike periods because they can be launched immediately when needed and terminated after each 48-hour burst, paying only for actual usage without any long-term commitment. Using spot instances for baseline capacity introduces interruption risk. AWS can reclaim spot capacity with a 2-minute notice, making spot unsuitable for a customer-facing portal that must remain continuously available. Sizing reserved instances to cover both baseline and peak simultaneously would over-provision for the 350+ days per year when campaigns are not running, paying reservation charges for capacity that sits idle. Dedicated hosts provide physical server isolation for software licensing compliance and are not a cost optimization mechanism for absorbing variable traffic bursts. Let's break down this cost puzzle. Picking the right EC2 purchase option is a classic exam trap. Picture a hotel that's always 70% full, but 6 times a year, a conference fills every room for 2 days. You'd lock in long-term contracts for those permanent guests, then rent extra rooms on the fly during the conference. That's exactly the play here. Reserve your baseline EC2 capacity on a 3-year term. You save up to 72% compared to on-demand. For those 48-hour campaign spikes, spin up on-demand and shut them down when traffic drops. Don't use spot for baseline. AWS can pull that capacity with 2 minutes notice. And don't size your reserved instances to cover peak traffic. You'd pay for idle servers 350 days a year. The punchline? Lock in what's predictable, flex what isn't. Midpoint check. CloudFront caches static assets, Global Accelerator routes dynamic traffic on the AWS backbone. Spot suits interruptible jobs. Reserved plus on-demand covers spiky customer-facing loads. Cloud HSM beats KMS for dedicated hardware compliance. Time for another one. Let's check question 11. Fabricom Insurance stores millions of customer documents including claims forms, medical records, and financial statements in Amazon S3 buckets. A compliance officer is concerned that sensitive data such as social security numbers, credit card numbers, and health information may reside in buckets without appropriate access controls or encryption. Which AWS service automatically discovers and alerts on this sensitive data in S3? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. S3 sensitive data discovery is Macy's sole purpose. Amazon Macy uses machine learning and pattern matching to automatically discover and classify sensitive data stored in Amazon S3, including personally identifiable information such as social security numbers, protected health information, and financial account details. Macy generates detailed findings when it detects sensitive data that may be stored without adequate protection, enabling compliance teams to take corrective action. GuardDuty focuses on threat detection by analyzing CloudTrail events, VPC flow logs, and DNS logs for suspicious or malicious activity. It does not scan S3 object content for sensitive data patterns. Security Hub aggregates findings from multiple security services, but does not independently scan S3 objects for sensitive content. AWS Config tracks the configuration state of AWS resources such as bucket policies and encryption settings, but does not read or classify the content of stored objects. Ready. We're on question 12. Quick check. Northwind Core's CISO is mapping organizational capabilities to the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework before beginning a cloud migration. The CISO needs to identify which CAF perspective owns the capabilities of identity and access management, detective controls, infrastructure protection, data protection, and incident response. Which CAF perspective contains these capabilities? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. All 5 named capabilities live in one CAF perspective. The security perspective of the AWS Cloud Adoption Framework encompasses identity and access management, detective controls, infrastructure protection, data protection and privacy, and incident response capabilities. This perspective is typically led by security architects, compliance officers, and the CISO. The business perspective focuses on financial management, portfolio management, risk management, and strategic alignment of cloud investments with business outcomes. The governance perspective covers audit and compliance, risk governance, portfolio governance, and organizational change management at the governance layer. The operations perspective addresses IT service delivery, infrastructure management, application management, database operations, and event and incident management from an operational standpoint. Let us switch gears. Question 13. Classic exam trap. Litware's newly onboarded cloud team has IAM administrator permissions for the company's AWS account. The team lead asks which specific account management actions still require logging in with the root user credentials rather than their IAM administrator identity. Which 2 actions can only be performed by the AWS account root user? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option B and option D. Root tasks are irreversible account identity actions, not IAM work. Changing the AWS account name and email address modifies the foundational identity credentials of the account itself. Because this action affects the account owner identity, AWS restricts it exclusively to the root user to prevent unauthorized modification of the account's primary contact information. Closing the AWS account is a high-stakes, irreversible action that terminates all resources and billing relationships associated with the account. AWS restricts this to the root user to protect against accidental or unauthorized account deletion that could not be undone. Creating IAM users and adding them to groups is a routine access management operation that can be performed by any IAM principal with IAM administrative permissions. It does not require root credentials. Enabling multi-factor authentication for an IAM user is an IAM management task within the scope of IAM administrative permissions and does not require the root user. Attaching an AWS managed policy to an IAM role is a standard identity management operation available to any principal with sufficient IAM permissions and is not a root exclusive task. Let us switch gears. Question 14. The trap is partial correctness. A media company stores raw video files in Amazon S3 that must be immediately accessible for production editing. After 30 days, files are rarely accessed but must still be retrievable within several hours for occasional review. After 1 year, files must be retained indefinitely for legal compliance, but are virtually never retrieved. Which two S3 storage classes should the company use to minimize storage costs while meeting all three requirements? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option A and Option D. Standard IA looks right for the middle tier but hides gotchas. S3 Standard is the correct class for the active production phase because it provides sub-millisecond retrieval latency with no minimum storage duration charge, making it ideal for files accessed frequently during editing. S3 Glacier Flexible Retrieval is the lowest cost class for the long-term compliance archive phase where retrieval times of minutes to hours are acceptable, and objects are virtually never accessed, satisfying the legal retention requirement at minimal expense. S3 Standard IA carries a 30-day minimum storage duration charge and per retrieval fees that would increase costs for the middle window given infrequent but unpredictable access. S3 Intelligent Tearing automates transitions for data with unknown access patterns, but carries a per-object monitoring fee that adds unnecessary overhead when the access pattern is predictable. S3 One-Zone IA reduces availability by storing data in a single availability zone, and is not appropriate for compliance archives that require high durability. Let's slow down here. The video file lifecycle is exactly what this question is testing. Imagine you're an editor at a streaming company. You shoot a big interview, call it episode 42. For the first 30 days, your team is constantly pulling clips. S3 Standard fits perfectly. Instant access, no retrieval fee. After 30 days, nobody touches it. Here's the trap. S3 Standard IA is the infrequent access tier. It charges a 30-day minimum stay fee, even if you delete the file sooner. So costs go up, not down. At the 1-year mark, an S3 lifecycle rule fires automatically. The file moves to Glacier Flexible Retrieval, the deep archive tier, for cents per gigabyte. Hours to retrieve is fine. It just needs to legally exist. Standard, then Glacier, 2 classes. Done. Let us switch gears. Question 15. Let the constraints drive the choice. Relic Cloud operates a customer-facing web application deployed in 2 AWS regions, ES East 1 and EU West 1. The team wants users to be automatically routed to whichever region provides the lowest network latency from their location. If one region becomes unhealthy, all traffic should automatically shift to the healthy region. Which Amazon Route 53 configuration should the solutions architect implement? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Latency routing plus health checks handles both speed and failover. Latency-based routing directs each DNS query to the AWS region that has the lowest measured network latency for the user's location, which directly satisfies the requirement of routing to the fastest region. Enabling Route 53 health checks on both endpoints ensures that if a region's endpoint fails its health check, Route 53 automatically removes it from DNS responses and routes all traffic to the remaining healthy region. Simple routing does not evaluate latency or user location, and cannot be associated with health checks for automatic failover. Multiple values result in round-robin responses regardless of performance or endpoint health. Weighted routing splits traffic according to configured percentage weights, and does not factor in actual network latency measured from the user's location. It would direct roughly half the traffic to each region regardless of which is faster for a given user. Geolocation routing makes decisions based on the country or continent from which the DNS query originates, not on actual network latency. A user in South America could be routed to US East 1 based on geolocation configuration, even if EU West 1 has lower measured latency, and geolocation routing alone does not provide the automatic latency-based path selection the team requires. Through 15, route-only tasks are always account-level irreversible actions, not routine IAM work. S3 Glacier Flexible covers long-term compliance archives when hours retrieval is acceptable. Route 53 Latency plus Health Checks delivers both speed and resilience. Keep your focus here. Question 16. Do not answer a different question. Tailspin Logistics is migrating a self-managed PostgreSQL database running on on-premises physical servers to AWS. The operations team wants to eliminate manual patching, backup scheduling, and version upgrade tasks. The application layer and database engine will remain unchanged. No code rewrites or architectural changes are planned. The migration must be completed within 8 weeks. Which AWS migration strategy does this approach represent? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Lift, tinker, shift means managed service with the same engine. Re-platform, sometimes called lift, tinker and shift, involves moving an application to AWS and making targeted optimizations, such as migrating a self-managed database to a fully managed service like Amazon RDS, without changing the core application architecture, database engine, or application code. Eliminating manual patching, backup management, and version upgrades by adopting Amazon RDS for PostgreSQL is a textbook re-platform decision. The engine stays the same, the application layer is untouched, but the operational model improves significantly. Rehost moves the database to an EC2 instance with no changes whatsoever. The team would still own all patching, backups, and upgrades manually, which contradicts the stated goal. Refactor requires redesigning the application using cloud-native patterns, involves significant code and architecture changes, and far exceeds the scope of what is described. Repurchase means abandoning the existing application entirely and adopting a SaaS alternative from a third-party vendor, which does not apply here since the team intends to keep PostgreSQL. All right, question 17. Underline the key phrase mentally. Contesso's development team is building a content management system where multiple Amazon EC2 instances spread across 2 availability zones must simultaneously read and write to a shared file storage layer. The application expects standard POSIX-compliant file system calls. Which AWS storage service should they use? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. POSIX plus multiple ASes simultaneously always points to EFS. Amazon EFS is a fully managed, scalable network file system that can be mounted concurrently by multiple EC2 instances across multiple availability zones within the same AWS region. It provides a standard NFS-compatible POSIX file system interface, supporting the same file operations, permissions, and locking semantics that applications expect from traditional shared file systems. Amazon S3 provides object storage access through a REST API rather than a POSIX file system interface. Applications must use the S3 API to read and write objects, which is incompatible with applications relying on standard file system calls such as open, read, write, and close without an intermediary abstraction layer. Amazon EBS provides block storage for EC2 instances, and multi-attach allows a single IO1 or IO2 provisioned IOPS volume to be attached to up to 16 Nitro-based instances simultaneously. However, EBS multi-attach is strictly limited to instances within a single availability zone, and requires the application itself to manage concurrent write coordination to prevent data corruption. It is not a general-purpose cross as shared file system. Amazon FSx for Windows File Server delivers a fully managed Windows-native SMB protocol file system with Active Directory integration, designed for Windows workloads requiring Windows ACLs and DFS namespace support. It is not the appropriate choice for Linux-based EC2 instances that require POSIX-compliant file access. All right. Question 18. Follow the operational constraint. Contesso's development team runs MySQL on self-managed Amazon EC2 instances. A security audit revealed that the team frequently falls behind on database engine patching, creating critical vulnerabilities. The team plans to migrate to Amazon RDS for MySQL. Which responsibility that was previously the customer's on EC2 does AWS assume after the migration to Amazon RDS? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. The audit finding about patching shows exactly what AWS takes over. Amazon RDS is a managed database service where AWS is responsible for the underlying infrastructure, operating system, and database engine patching. When running MySQL on EC2, patching the MySQL engine software is entirely the customer's responsibility. After migrating to RDS, AWS takes ownership of database engine patching and updates as part of the managed service layer, directly addressing the audit finding. Data classification and tagging remain the customer's responsibility regardless of which AWS service hosts the data. This is a fundamental principle of the shared responsibility model that never shifts to AWS. IAM policy creation and management for controlling access to AWS resources is always the customer's responsibility. Security group configuration controlling inbound traffic to the RDS instance is always the customer's responsibility, even with fully managed services. The customer is always responsible for their data, access management, and network security boundaries regardless of the service model. Okay. Question 19. Do not reward the familiar term. A security engineer is establishing proper account hygiene for a newly created AWS organization. The engineer needs to understand which tasks require the AWS account root user credentials and restrict root access accordingly. Which 2 actions can only be performed by the AWS account root user? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Account-level identity changes and permanent closure, root only. Changing the AWS account name and root email address is a root-only task because these are account-level identity settings that only the account owner can modify through root credentials. Closing the AWS account permanently is also root only because it irreversibly decommissions the account and all its resources. Creating IAM users with administrator permissions can be performed by any IAM principal that holds the appropriate IAM create user and related permissions. It does not require root. Attaching IAM policies to groups is a standard IAM administrative action available to any authorized IAM user or role with IAM permissions. Creating VPCs and configuring subnets are standard infrastructure actions available to any IAM principal holding EC2 networking permissions. Okay. Question 20. Prioritize the stated requirement. Northwind Corp operates a large customer contact center and wants to build an automated analytics pipeline. The pipeline must first convert recorded customer support calls stored as audio files into text transcripts, and then analyze those transcripts to detect customer sentiment, identify frequently mentioned complaint topics, and extract key phrases. Which 2 AWS AI services should Northwind Corp use to build this pipeline? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option B. Audio to text, then text to insights. 2 services, 2 pipeline stages. Amazon Transcribe is a fully managed automatic speech recognition service that converts audio and video recordings into accurate text transcripts. It supports custom vocabularies, speaker diarization to distinguish between multiple speakers, and various audio formats including phone call recordings, making it the correct choice for the first stage of the pipeline. Amazon Comprehend is a natural language processing service that analyzes text to extract sentiment, positive, negative, neutral, or mixed entities, key phrases, dominant language, and custom categories. Applying Comprehend to the transcripts produced by Transcribe directly fulfills the requirements for sentiment detection and complaint topic identification. Amazon Recognition analyzes images and video streams for object detection, facial recognition, and scene understanding. It does not process audio files or analyze text for sentiment. Amazon Kendra is an intelligent enterprise search service designed to help employees find information across internal documents and repositories, not for call transcript analytics. Amazon Textract extracts printed text, handwriting, and structured data from scanned documents and PDFs, but does not process audio input or perform sentiment and key phrase analysis. 3 takeaways from this session. First, SNS fans messages to all subscribers simultaneously. SQS retention and DLQs are SQS features, not SNS. Second, Cloud HSM gives dedicated single-tenant hardware with zero AWS visibility. KMS is multi-tenant and fails strict compliance. Third, Route 53 latency routing measures real network conditions, geolocation routes by location, not by speed. These questions hit the most tested layers of AWS, security controls, routing policies, and cost strategy. Nail those patterns now and the real exam will feel like familiar territory.